I think AARP ought to give the Republican majority a big award for creating tax treatment that's going to stimulate capital investment, make their retirement accounts perform better. Ultimately, it's going to get us back to the kind of growth that Americans expect and not the Euro type of 1 to 1.5% growth that we've unfortunately become accustomed to.
Is it fair?
It's very fair. It cuts taxes all across the board, cuts taxes for the middle class. It removes entirely the bottom tax bracket that exists right now and reduces the second bracket significantly. And it doubles the standard deduction. And it still has the child care tax credit, which is very important to me because I think we want to be in the business of stimulating united families.
There are those who would then look on the other side. You heard Leader Pelosi say it's Armageddon. She could be alluding to several points. You know her well, and one of them might be this. And your fellow Florida Representative Lois Frankel said this about some of those issues that would be of concern. The tax scam will throw millions off health care and explode our deficit by almost $1.5 trillion, meaning major cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. Americans deserve a better deal. Now, she is alluding to potential here under the pay-go law, which, you know, a tax bill of this size could trigger cuts, and those cuts would come from big chunks of money. Medicare would be one. How will this bill affect those who rely on Medicare, specifically here in the state of Florida?
Well, first of all, that's a particularly specious argument that the Democrats started drumming up yesterday after the bill passed, that the bill's bad because someday someone's going to cut Medicare as a result of it. It has nothing to do with Medicare or Medicaid. What it does have to do is removing that mandate so that we can start to see alternatives to Obamacare this year. And I hope that we're going to succeed in that to give Americans the kind of insurance they need.
Well, part of the pay-go law here, again, as you know, is you're going to have to offset, and the $1.5 trillion potentially here that is the cost of this particular tax plan. And in order to do that, Congress would have to override these cuts that are required by the law. So where would the cuts come from if they are triggered?
Oh, wow. There are so many places to cut fat, pork, waste, and abuse in this government. I've learned more in the last 9 or 10 months since I took this job about the government that I wish I didn't know. You could start with some of the earned income tax credit fraud, which is in the billions. You can start with welfare fraud. You can start with some of the bureaucratic, the excess bureaucrats in the federal government in Washington, D.C. and scattered around, that we could run a much leaner government than we have. I think you could find $1.5 trillion a lot of ways.
So, Representative, outside of yourself, though, can you guarantee, and I'm not asking you to put it in writing necessarily, but do you believe then that the rest of your caucus will not touch Medicare based on the requirements that are triggered by the pay-go law?
I would be surprised if anybody touches Medicare. There is a problem with Medicare, though. There's not enough competition for the drugs. Medicare Part D and CHIP were both rushed through so fast in a way that I don't know what the deals that were made back then, but they don't have the kind of competition for drugs that Medicaid does. And I'd like to see that reformed.
Because your party is in power and holds both of the houses as well as the White House, and you mentioned some of those other pieces of fat. Are you saying and suggesting then to Leader Ryan that you would like him to go after those right now?
Well, there's a lot of pork and waste and abuse I'd like to see him go after. You know, Senator Flake published a book about all the different little programs that don't make any sense. It's kind of humorous. Tom Coburn used to do the same thing when he was in the Senate. And so I'm hopeful that the leadership will be interested in cutting some of these ridiculous things the same way they were interested in getting rid of all these special interest tax deductions and credits that had built up over the years that were swept away by our new law.
All right, I want to move on to the topic that you, because of your committee membership here, Russia is something that you've been talking about, that you've had to deal with. 3 Republicans, your fellow Republicans, Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, Ron DeSantis, have openly criticized Mueller's investigation. All of them have had contact with the White House or President Trump to date. I'm going to play a little bit of what Representative Jordan said, then I want to get your reaction.
Have you had conversations with the White House, not about the questions you ask, but about the Mueller investigation in general? Well, I've talked with the White House about all kinds of things. We've had talks with the White House about tax policy. We have talks about welfare policy. We've had talks about Obamacare. Of course, we've had talks with the White House.
So Jim Berman there, CNN, as you can see there, Representative asking, okay, what kind of conversations have you had about Russia with the president? But on the flip side, Representative Jordan does have obligation to the Judiciary and House Oversight Committee. Do you see this as potentially a conflict here of what he is doing, of the conversations he may have had?
No, like he said, he talks to the White House on a wide range of issues. I think the unfortunate thing is that Mr. Mueller has had such a distinguished career, and he got into this thing, and it's become so hopelessly partisan and compromised, the way he picked, the kind of staff that he picked, and some of the horrible things coming out of the FBI and the Department of Justice that some of your people were talking about earlier. It's very unfortunate. There's been no evidence of collusion, and there's been no evidence that Russia succeeded in its futile efforts.
What makes you say, Representative, that Robert Mueller, widely esteemed on both sides of the aisle, you have said in the past that you respect certainly his career, his longtime career serving this country. What makes you say now that, as you were just saying, that he is undertaking a partisan investigation? When we've seen investigations of past, they can take years. Is he not only undertaking that which he has been charged to do very systematically?
Well, I think, like I say, I do respect his public service and the great things he's done for our country, and I don't understand why this thing has gotten off to such a partisan foot. He picked a team that is given 12 times as much money to Democrats as Republicans, so it's hardly a balanced team. And it's just inevitable that sooner or later some things were going to come out of those people who were so highly partisan. A lot of them worked for Hillary Clinton. One of them worked for the Clinton Foundation and Eric Holder. That's not a balanced investigative team.